So excited to bring back onto the show Matthew Ho, a disabled Marine combat veteran for peace and a senior fellow with the Center for International Policy. In 2009, he resigned from his position with the State Department in Afghanistan in protest of the escalation of the war. He ran as a Green Party candidate for the U.S. Senate to represent the people of North Carolina in 2022 and was sabotaged, of course, by the Democrats. Barry Riesch is a retired carpenter and building inspector. He is also a Vietnam veteran, former national president of Veterans for Peace, and has been active in the anti-war movement in the Twin Cities and beyond for over 30 years. Engaging in this work, he has participated in delegations to Vietnam, South Korea, Cuba, and Mexico. As an environmental activist, he focuses on how the military is contributing to climate change. It is a life goal of his to leave the world a better place. So welcome, Matthew and Barry. Thank you so much for joining.
Yeah. Hi, Katie. Good to see you.
You too. I want to ask each of you how you became Veterans for Peace. What turned you into Veterans for Peace? Did you have an aha moment? Was it a gradual process?
It's kind of a long story. You know, as a young man, I went from the workhouse. You know, my life was on a downward trajectory. I went from the workhouse into the military, from jail to the military. So that's the way my life was going. You know, I was not awoke, you know, at that time. You know, in my era, at high school, you either got drafted or you joined the military, or you deferred. You know, and I managed to screw that up. My folks thought it. But anyhow, I wasn't on a good path. I served time over in Vietnam, and I regret, you know, I try not to be too hard on the soldiers that are doing the dirty work in Israel, because I've been on that side, you know, and I regret things that I've been involved with. But anyhow, I came home disillusioned, but I wasn't awoke. And then in 1978, I got into recovery for alcoholism. And through that process, then I became awake. You know, so basically since 1978 forward, I just have become aware of what my country is doing, war, and I'm like a multi-issue person, but I focus on war because that's what speaks the loudest to me, you know, and of course now the environmental destruction of the climate crisis. So anyhow, and then 91, I did our first incursion of Iraq. I found Veterans for Peace, and I've been actively involved ever since with that organization. So I don't know if that tells the story, but that's it.
And what woke you up? You were in treatment, you said, for alcoholism?
Best I can describe it is I was asleep. I wasn't, you know, it was like spiritual awakening, you know, and it became conscious. I just was not conscious. It's just like the people that are, you know, following the media today. Right. They're asleep. I was talking to a gal the other day that did, and I was trying to make a medical appointment. She's Gaza? What do you mean, Gaza? I mean, she didn't even know the word, you know, right. And so she's not awake. You know, most of the American public is not awake, in my opinion.
And what about you, Matt?
You know, it's similar to what Barry was saying, and I think there's probably a connection there in terms of the stopping the alcohol that allows you to at least entertain the thoughts of what you knew, you know, what you took part in, you know, to burst the bubble and to, you know, because what I found for myself was, I went to Iraq the first time and I thought the war was screwed up and was a mistake, but I thought I could make a difference. I thought like I could be a moral actor in the war, and that was just, you know, complete folly. You know, the war made me an agent of its immorality. And then, you know, you lie to yourself, you make excuses. You know, I went back a second time because I thought I could bring home guys alive. I was a better officer than others. And then, then I'm at that point morally and intellectually broken for taking part in those wars. But you know what? I'm a piece of meat and I might as well just continue this. And so I went to Afghanistan, and then seeing Afghanistan was no different than Iraq. I think that was the great hope I had, that somehow Afghanistan was going to be different than Iraq. And of course, everything I knew from reading history and everything else I knew about previous American, what the American Empire had done overseas, as well here on this continent. But that was in the past. It wasn't connected. You know, my generation wouldn't be making these mistakes, right? You know, not mistakes. But anyway, and then being in Afghanistan, seeing that there was no fundamental difference between Iraq and the Afghan wars, no fundamental difference between the Democrats pursuing and escalating the Afghan war and the Bush administration, creating, invading, and occupying Iraq. So, for me, it was gradual. I resisted it. I lied to myself. I made excuses. And then one of the things was, though, before I went to Afghanistan, I was, suicidal, and I was drinking heavily to deal with the moral injury of being a part of those wars. And I think what happened, one of the reasons why I was able to see Afghanistan clearly and allow myself to accept that what I was taking part in was wrong, what I was doing, I was being intellectually and morally dishonest with myself, was the fact that I wasn't able to drink in Afghanistan. I wasn't able to like numb myself, right? I wasn't able to like bring myself down to the level where I thought I should be because of alcohol. And I was able to have these thoughts, right? Because back home in between the wars, I would just medicate and punish myself with alcohol. And the same thing continued after the wars, of course, until I got help for it. But, so I resigned from my position to the State Department in Afghanistan at that point in 2009. And that brought me into connection with Veterans for Peace and other anti-war and peace groups. And it's, I think some of it is you ask yourself when you're in these wars, when you're coming out of them, when you're dealing with this moral injury of what you've done, what you've participated in, one of the questions is, what was it for? And then you find yourself having nothing else. And what is your life for? And then you find like an organization like Veterans for Peace, you find guys like Barry, and like, holy, you feel this way too. You want to blow blow your head out because of what you did. But now I can do something about it, and I can atone, I can repent, I can be better, and I can be around you all, and you understand. And so, VFP, Veterans for Peace, it's not hyperbole to say that for a lot of us, it gave us our lives back.
Wow. That's really moving and fascinating that you had such parallel tracks, even though you were in such different wars in different times.
Oh, absolutely. You see, I mean, you go to your substance abuse treatment at the VA, you go to your PTSD treatment at the VA, and you're in these group therapies with these guys that are, 30 years older than you, right? Nothing in common except that you went to war and you regret it. And, thank God you're in those groups, because you're there with people who get it and people who get you, and they're willing to give you a chance. And because these guys understand and they're willing to give you a chance, you're willing to give yourself a chance. Right. And, but, we all know that the aspects of veterans and the high rates of suicide, and a lot of that, particular combat veterans, have to do with this moral injury from taking part in wars, regretting it, the shame, the guilt, but then not having any way to heal from that. And so that's how way you heal, is you be around other guys who did the same sins that you did.
Right. Wow. So what are your thoughts on what is happening right now in Gaza, but also Iran as veterans? How do you see this conflict going?
Everything that Ellie, was it Assal? I mean, it just was so right on the money. I mean, Matt kind of directs us to just figure out a couple of things that drive us crazy, but the lies and the distortion, it just is, Israel bombs, and then Iran very, openly, let's say we're going to respond. And then the headlines in the New York Times, oh yeah, well, Iran dropped the bomb, but nothing about following Israel, so anyhow, it just drives me crazy. It's just, then one thing leads to the next escalation. There's no end to these things. I mean, ultimately, in Ukraine didn't need to start. This didn't need to start. Without U.S. supplying the weapons and the soldiers doing the dirty work, it didn't have to happen. It just absolutely, and it just drives me crazy that the death and suffering of the children, especially, it just pulls at my heart every day, and that's what keeps me involved the most. I've tried to do something every day since October 7th. But as a former soldier, I try, like I say, I know I've been on that side too. There's people that are doing the dirty work, and it's not net now. And those soldiers are going to have to live what they participated. That's and there's no escaping that. There's just no escaping it. They're burning their souls. And
what about you, Matt?
Yeah, I mean, so I was able to go to Palestine on a Veterans for Peace delegation in 2017. Went to the West Bank and East Jerusalem, and that's the occupation. And seeing that, for those of us who had not been, who had taken part in our occupations of Iraq and Afghanistan, I mean, that was holding a mirror up to our face. And so for those of us who went on that delegation, who understood the history, and we we understood what was going on there, and we had our opinions on it. But to have that personal experience of seeing these Israeli soldiers doing what we did in Iraq and Afghanistan, kicking in doors, going to people's homes, having the checkpoints, right? Humiliating people, having that power over people, right? As well as the abuse, the oppression, and then what we're seeing here in Gaza, of course. I think Barry's point about the lies, so the same lies that sustained Vietnam, the same lies that sustained Iraq and Afghanistan, that created it, you see it again. And so you recognize the same people. I mean, and it actually is the same people, right? In terms of, for the Americans, it's the same people in charge who are, I don't want to call what's happening with the U.S. role in Gaza as being complicit or supportive. U.S. is a participant. And I mean, it's so fully involved. The only thing is that we don't have our kids pulling the triggers. Other than that, we are basically doing everything else. We're a full participant. But the people who are running this war, then, who are running this genocide, more or less the same people that, for the wars in Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, Yemen, Libya, etc. I mean, so it's the same people. And if the Republicans were in power, won't it just be their tranche? So I think that's, for us, a lot of what we see. It's like holding a mirror up to our faces. And then, of course, the knowledge of what these weapon systems do, what it's like. Many of us have seen dead children. Many of us have been around this, I mean, so it what that's like. But then, too, the idea that so much of this, the Israelis could not be doing it without us. So all those bombs that are getting dropped there, those are American bombs. All those warplanes, those F-35s and F-15s and F-16s, those are all American warplanes. So I think there's the host of things that we see in terms of our roles, that we did, and now just being played out in front of us again.
Right. And do you think this is going to escalate?
I personally feel that this is what Biden's wanted for forever. I don't think they're trying to avoid anything. They're pushing it along, as far as I'm concerned. And for whatever reason, I mean, if we wanted to stop, we'd stop. If like the guy that was talking about, we're working at, we're not.
Matt Miller, yeah.
We're
at
not.
The State Department.
We're moving the Navy in. I suspect on our flotilla, we're probably going to run into some Navy ships. They're moving. Immediately we got to respond. There's never, hey, where's the Department of Peace, or where's the Department of Negotiation? Maybe we should sit down and take a look at this before we respond in some aggressive manner. Where is that? We just don't do that.
Right. I think there are those within the Israeli government, most of the ruling coalition, that wants this to escalate. First of all, for those who are in favor of the continuation and the entering the final phases of the greater Israel project of Zionism, this is the best opportunity they've had and the best opportunity they're going to get. So carry it out. In order to do that, you need to have these threats, right? As well as what we're seeing this week, nobody's paying attention to what's happening in Gaza. Right. So if you can have these distractions, as well as then you can make it seem as if here it goes into the trope of Israel up against all these enemies who surround them, who want to destroy them. So what few
living in a dangerous neighborhood, as they like to say.
That's right. So what few Democrats you had who were suggesting, they weren't going to really ever do anything about it,
right,
but suggesting that we should condition arms sales to Israel based upon human rights violations, which already is United States law through like 5 different laws, as well as, of course, all the international treaties and conventions we're a part of. But anyway, this has removed all that, right? So we have to give Israel everything they need because they're being attacked by the Iranians. I think the escalation serves political purposes in Israel. It serves certainly ideological and militarist purposes in Israel. I think the Biden administration, though, is horrified at the idea that it does escalate and that they're faced with $5 a gallon gasoline during a campaign. That would effectively destroy Joe Biden's reelection chances. Right. I mean, he's doing a great job by himself, right?
Yeah,
but,
right.
But the White House is also trapped because this relationship with Israel is structural. Even if Joe Biden was to wake up tomorrow and he could end this by calling Netanyahu and saying, it's over, you're not getting anything else from us. Well, the next day, the Congress would begin to impeach him. You know, I mean, so it's a structural issue where because we have this system of legalized bribery, the Israeli lobby is able to control our political system just in the way that pharma does and big ag does and the banks do and the military industrial complex does. So, yeah, I mean, I can see this escalation continuing to happen. And then, of course, you have the dangers of where does it go? And it's not hyperbole to talk about World War III. Syria, which is a key ally of Iran, which Israel bombs continuously. That's the proximate cause of Iran's attack on Saturday, was Israel's attack on Iran's consulate in Damascus. Well, what's also in Syria? Russian troops and American troops. And I mean, so this idea that this could get to a point where you have World War III, that's not hyperbole.
Right. Could you give an overview of all the wars that the United States is involved in? I mean, not that we have time for all of them, but just some of them right now.
One thing I will say is that since 1991, according to the Congressional Research Service, the United States has been engaged in 250 military operations overseas. So you can look at it that way. In its scans of the wars since 9/11, according to Brown University Cost of War Project, the United States has had troops in combat in close to 20 countries. I think it's 18 or 19. So in the last 20 years, we've had kids or young men and women in foreign countries, and 18 or 19 of them killing and being killed. I mean, so the scale of this in my lifetime, I was born in 73. If you look at, say, go from Western Africa all the way through South Central Asia, all the way to Pakistan, I don't know if there are any countries that haven't been touched by the wars. And then, of course, Ken Klippenstein at The Intercept had a great article a couple of days ago where he talked about what happened over the weekend. And he's able to map it out so that there's 16 countries involved in the current fighting in the Middle East. So whether it's, Yemen or Israel or Hezbollah and, those type of things, of course, the Americans, the British, the French, but then also too, you have a lot of other countries like, say, Oman, which is where the U.S. Navy ships go all the time. The U.S. Navy ships that are firing missiles into Yemen are docking in Oman all the time. I mean, so 16 countries are involved in this. So the idea that as the U.S. media and our politicians want to portray as this simply being a very binary fight of good versus evil, right? Of civilization versus barbarism, right? You can get into all other things of just Israel versus Iran. That is so far from the truth.